All right, well, let's go. Good morning or good afternoon to everyone, no matter where you are. I'm Danielle Varda. I am the CEO and founder at Visible Network Labs, and I am thrilled to have time with you all today. We've been doing a webinar four-part series around bringing chaos, going from chaos to clarity in the work that we're doing on building ecosystems, networks, collaboration inside our communities. So today we are specifically talking about one of those four topics, which is capturing data from your ecosystem members. So I am going to introduce myself, and I'll introduce Dr. Jenny Lawler here, but she's going to take over about halfway through, so you'll get to meet her as well. She's our Director of Data Science and Insights, and you'll see really smart about all this kind of stuff, so you'll get to spend some time with her as well. We definitely want to know who you are, so please put your name into the chat and what you do and how you got here and why you're interested in this topic. Anything about you that might be interesting, we'd love to hear. So our little prompt to do that, and we will start with just by telling you a little bit about Visible Network Labs very briefly. We say that we make invisible networks visible. So we've really seen the power of being able to see the connections between us. We know we have networks all around us, and they're almost impossible for us to see, for the people who are trying to help us see as well. So when we can make those visible, we can not only just talk about them, but measure them and start to build strategies and action steps that can improve them. So that's important to us. Our mission is to strengthen social connectedness at the individual and systems level. And we like to do that by supporting communities and people in organizations and all kinds of agencies that are trying to make these invisible ties visible. So we do that through building technology, through data science, trying to bring measurement to hard to measure things, and just tools to people as well. So we aren't going to talk much about network science today. We talk a lot about the network way of working, which is just the way most people find themselves in their work lives today, which is often around having to reach across sectors, being responsible for attending collaborations or leading networks and things like that. So we do this work to help support folks and communities that are trying to do this work together. We do a lot on network science, the science of how things are connected, and explain how that is the foundation of our work. But we have done that in the first two webinars, so we're going to skip that today. If you want to catch up on that, feel free to go to either of those recordings and you can see more of that. Today, we got through our intros. We're going to talk about the big questions that people bring to us. The first one is what to measure. So if I want to do this work, what should I measure? What questions should I be asking? And then the second one is like, how would you set this up and launch a survey? We use the Partner CPRM. That's our tool. So we'll show you how to do it in here. And then you can choose the tools that you want to use. There are a whole set of frequently asked questions that we get. So if we have time, we're going to go through those. Our webinars are always set to end at a quarter till the hour. So today at 12:45 for me. But we always offer to stay on the last 15 minutes for anyone who just wants to hang out and ask questions, maybe about your own projects, kind of come on screen and join in the conversation. So that's optional, the last 15 minutes. Okay, so I will go through just a couple of quick things. We always think it's important to talk about what we mean when we say the word network. You'll see a lot of these nodes and lines. So we use the term network because, and you might use collaboration, collective impact, ecosystem building. We use network because we measure it, and we measure it as these nodes and lines. So as we go through this whole process, every measure, every data point that we touch on is going to be associated with one of three types. The first are these nodes, which we refer to as your members. So these members can be organizations or people. You can make them other things like thoughts and ideas or events. But most of the folks using our platform are putting these in as organizations with people attached to them. Some people use the labels, the way they think about each node, as a person. I use the word node because that's actually what we call these little circles. The next data point are the relationships between them. And that's what makes this whole method and kind of software special, is that we not only collect information about all the members, but then how they're connected. So we connect the dots. So we will talk today a lot about how to measure those relationships. So I'll get into that in a little bit. And the third type of data are their attributes. So the attributes between that each of the members have can be all kinds of different things, whatever makes sense to you. In an interorganizational network, we always recommend at least coding them by their sector: public, private, nonprofit. Every organization falls into one of those three. There's some very special hybrid organizations, but they're unusual. So that's a really simple taxonomy you can use to start looking at different patterns in your networks. But we also recommend other kinds of attributes. And in our first webinar, we went into some depth on that. So again, if you want to see a little bit more about attributes, go ahead and do that. We've built the Partner CPRM. It's a community partner relationship management system. And that's where we do all of our work. It's the tool that we hope you all might want to use as well. And we have free parts of it that everyone's welcome to use. And then there are some parts behind a paywall. It's how we support our work as well, and keep the whole thing sustainable. So we'll be working within that today. And if you haven't already signed up, you should definitely, and Alex on our team will go in and put the link to sign up right into the chat and get yourself an account. Once you have an account, you can do a lot of the things we're going to show you. And there will also be some limits until you decide to subscribe to it. But we encourage everyone to do that. You could even follow along with some of the webinar. The primary features of a CPRM are really that there are places where you can bring in all the information about your members, but then also this concept of being able to connect the dots. So data visualizations of those connections are an important part of being able to use the data. We are connected to ArcGIS through an API, so we also support geospatial analysis in here once you have everyone's address in there. And then up here in the right, you'll see just what we call member profiles, which is just like a way to see each individual member of your network. So key features are you get data, all your members in there, you can collect data about them, and then you can see it, analyze it, and share it back out. All right, so I talked about our 4-part series. Today, we are talking about capturing data. First, we talked about developing and managing the partnership database. And the next webinar, we're gonna talk about once you have data, what do you do with it? What insights can you find? So that'll be a really fun one to see all the data visualizations and things like that. And the fourth one is about sharing your data. We believe at Visible Network Labs in the democratization of data. And if we take data from community, we should find ways to give it back to them. So we've built features that do that inside the platform. We're really proud of that. We're not like a typical kind of technology company. We're very focused on building the capacity of communities to both have data and use the data. So you'll see a lot in our 4th webinar around how to do that work. I'm just going to do a little recall of what we did in our first one. That was a really long webinar on how to basically take your data on your members and get it all into one place, a membership partnership database. We know that people have multiple spreadsheets and lists. We know that existing ways to kind of track and sort them are complicated or maybe difficult to reconcile. And it might be hard to track partners as they turn over or contacts change. So we're trying to really solve that problem for folks. Some people use a CRM, a customer relationship management system, but those are really built around the framework of converting people to paying customers through marketing funnels. And that is not what we're doing. So our framework is built about building community connection and capacity of those community members. So what we did is we went through how to get all your partners out of your spreadsheets and get them into the system, storing all the attributes or fields that you want to track, filtering and searching and analyzing that data. Once you have all that in there, you can just see it really quickly. And actually, we're going to be switching back and forth between the platform and the slides today. So here I am. I'm going to start from the beginning and just make sure that everyone, we realized in the first webinar that we didn't show you this. So this is just a quick moment to go over how we actually see all of the data as soon as you get your member information in there. So I just logged in, and when you log in, just remember that you'll see your ecosystems over here. If you weren't on the first one, you'll have some data sets up here that you can use to kind of play around with, but your ecosystem will be this top one. A completely free part of our tool is the ability to add in all of these members through your spreadsheets, uploads. Our libraries are where you can set up your attributes, but getting all your members in there is kind of that first step, and you can do that in many different ways. I'm not going to go through all that again because that is what we did, but right here there's a button that says explore. So kind of the instant gratification is getting to see all of your members in visualizations. And so what you're seeing here is loading in all the members that I have in this particular ecosystem. What's interesting about this view is that a whole bunch of them here have no connections. And that's because they're literally just the members inside our ecosystem. I'm going to pick here to color by their primary focus area. You can see how we've tagged them over here. So even though there's no connections yet between them, you can imagine that you can start to see patterns and clusters around some of these attributes. What you see kind of peppered in here is a couple of surveys that have been sent out in this particular ecosystem that have started to build out some of the networks of networks within our bigger ecosystem. So I'm using a lot of jargon here. So the ecosystem is all the members, everyone, every little node in here. And each one is a unique, in this case, organization. And then what you're starting to see here is, for example, this group was all invited to take a survey, which is what we're going to talk to you about today. So as soon as that starts happening, the data inside your platform starts to show you those connections. So you can imagine if everyone's been invited to take a survey, this map will no longer show all these little isolated nodes, but the connections between them. So again, without paying for a platform or anything, you get to see these kinds of visualizations. You'll also see what we call the attribute summary. So any of the data that you have spent all that time importing about your members is just instantly available. Again, if you weren't on our first webinar, be sure to go check it out, because we also show you how to go and do a little bit more in-depth exploring of those members once you have them all in here using the Explore tab. So I'm going to go back here and just talk a little bit about measuring. So capturing data, you'll see that we intentionally use the word capturing. Not all communities like to be studied. Most don't. So sometimes if we use the term that we are researching them or collecting data or doing surveys, it doesn't always land right. And most of our users are actually using the terms, we're going to capture some data because we're building a tool together that we want to share with the community. Sharing is not a requirement, but that is some of the ways that we've learned from people that is a comfortable way to talk about it. So you'll see we use the word capturing rather than collecting or sending surveys. So what we know makes this hard is most people are unsure what to ask. How do I connect the dots? What do I need to know about my network? The data is pretty complex, but we'll show you how to simplify that. Sometimes there's difficulties in engaging partners in data collection. So we can talk about that a little bit, and just lacking appropriate tools. Asking network questions is a really specific way of collecting data. You can use other kinds of survey tools, but then you usually have to transform the data into the kind of data you want to use and then get it into a network tool. So we have built in some of those features to help alleviate that. So this is our measurement framework. Most network surveys, most efforts to collect data and connect the dots focus here on interrelationships. And that's really like, how are things connected? And they might focus on things like the frequency of that interaction and things like that. We also capture interrelationships, but we'll capture several layers of the quality and the content of those relationships as well. But we go a little bit farther in our work. We also try to look at concepts in networks that we know influence outcomes and also our action steps. So for example, attribution. we often want to know if we're putting all this time and effort into building a network, is it working? Are people building connections? Are their connections strengthening? So we have some questions in there that allow us to do that. I always say the only real measure of a relationship are the perceptions we have of each other. I mean, we all are on a webinar together today, so that's a relationship. But your perception of me right now and my perception of you is our real relationship. And for 40 of you, I have no idea what that is. So imagine if I did, we'd be able to like work together better. So capturing perception. Some people will say like, well, those are perceptions. That's not real data. In networks, perceptions is everything. So being able to highlight and make those visible to us is really important. And then we look for things just simply like agreement. So to what degree are we all agreeing on the measures and the like things like how successful are we? So we can see, is this network on the same page? So it's not just that 80% said we're not successful. It might be more important that 50% said we are and 50% said we aren't. Why are we on a different pages? So I would say it's really hard to be successful in a network if we're not on the same page about what the definition of success is. So we get a lot of data and insights from that. Okay, for your, as a resource, we have what we call the Partner Community Network Survey. It's a survey template built inside the platform. I am going to quickly show you where that is. If you click on this link, and you all will get the slides after, you're going to come to this blog that describes our default survey. And then when you click on the link, you're going to see the questions in the survey. We do ask that the survey only be used inside the partner platform. It's just one of the ways that we help protect our intellectual property. But we also want to share it with you all and make sure that you have access to it. So you'll see the questions on that default survey. So I'm going to go through a couple of those right now before I pass it back over to Jenny. So the way that we organize our question set is in a survey. The way that we do it is we'll usually ask questions about the respondent, let's say their organization, maybe what kinds of resources they contribute. Then we'll ask them questions about the whole network, but then we ask them the network questions. So let me go through those. So for example, we often ask a resource contribution question. And so we'll ask the member what kinds of resources they can contribute. With that data and their responses, we can build things like this that we call a resource inventory. Helps us kind of see who says they have what kinds of things to contribute to the network. And then we can build some asset mapping around this and things like that. We'll also ask about like what people believe the outcomes of the network are or should be, and which factors have led to success, levels of success. So you'll see some of those kinds of questions here as well. So those are all kind of like normal network survey questions, but there is a framework around them that we use in our analysis. Okay, I want to jump right to this. So kind of the big part of this is figuring out how to ask the network questions. A really important part of this is bounding the network. We say it's the hardest part of it. It's deciding who to include. You'll get resources also. We have briefs on this, but really the question is from your member list, who do you want to include in your data capture? So we recommend creating selection criteria for who's in or out of the network boundary. If this feels like an impossibly hard task, you're doing the right thing. It's so hard to do this part. But once you have done that in the platform, that the first thing you have to do to get network questions or network data is ask a network member selection question. Basically, what this does is it allows you to let the respondent pick which other members they are connected to. So there's a few ways to do that. One, I'm actually going to start with the second one here, is the bounded list. We just give them a list. They see all the other partners, and then they answer questions about who they are connected to. Once they pick, then they get that smaller list to answer the relational questions about. An alternative to that is called a name generator, where people type in their own partner names. So that's often tons of people want to use that. It's more difficult to use because you're going to have to clean the data. And if I say VNL and Jenny says Visible Network Labs, we have to know it's the same organization and clean that up later. So there's a ton of work when you do a name generator. But you can also do a hybrid where you show them a list and then ask them who was missing from that list and they can put it in. So something to think about is that if you let people type in their own partners, you also have to make the choice, will other respondents be able to see those partners? But keep in mind that every time a partner is added, whoever's already taken the survey is not going to see them. So the most reliable and valid way to do this work is with a bounded list. Sometimes that's just impossible. We have all these options of ways to do this in there, and there's just pros and cons for each. It's all in kind of how you design it and then making the decisions on how to clean it. Once you have those in there, there's a whole series of types of relationship questions you can ask. So I'm going to go through them very briefly. I mentioned that we ask an attribution question. It's very simple, but we'll ask some people. This isn't so now they're answering questions about their partners. We call these dyads, the dyadic questions. We might ask them, how did this partnership start? Was it developed because of this network, or did you already know each other and it was strengthened? So this allows us to get measures on how many people's relationships were started or strengthened by this work. So we can understand whether our interventions, our investments in all this work are doing the systems building that we think it is. We also measure levels of collaboration, activities between the partners, and outcomes of the relationship. The last two things we measure, we have scales in here for the perceptions of value between partners and the perceptions of trust. I won't go through these just because we don't have as much time to do that, but we do use proxies for this. So I might be asked to answer a question about Jenny. To what degree do I believe she has power and influence? And then I will answer on this scale. And then I'll be asked, to what degree do I believe this partner has resources to contribute, or support and time commitment as well. And then for trust, we do the same thing, but we ask people to rate their partners on reliability, mission congruence, and openness to discussion. There's a whole paper on how we came up with these. We did a lot of qualitative work to get to these kinds of questions, but I'll just give you one quick example of how you might use them. For example, when selecting leaders in your network, we almost always pick those people who have power and influence. But there are some folks who have no resources to contribute and no power and influence, but they have a ton of time to commit. And so sometimes we want to make sure that we can find those people who might have a time ability to give that as their primary value, and not always go to the same leaders over and over again. We are on the roadmap. We always like to talk about what's coming next. We have all these survey templates that we've developed over the years, and we'll be starting to include those in the platform. So if you're interested in early childhood, you'll have a template to start with. We've been doing these kinds of studies for almost 20 years, and you can imagine we have a lot under our belt in that way. But I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Jenny now. Ask any questions in the chat. I'm going to go in there and I can answer some. And then we'll have time at the end as well. So Jenny, I'm going to stop sharing and let you take over.
Sounds good.
You ready?
Hi, everyone. I'm going to actually bring us over to the platform so we can talk a little bit about what does this actually look like? How do we set it up? What is this data collection process like in practice, and how can we use tools to help us do that? So this is our kind of landing page for the Partner CPRM. If anyone doesn't yet have a free account, feel free to register and you can follow along. Everything that I'm doing, you'll be able to kind of see from your own perspective. But you can also, I want to highlight here on this front page, we have some links to different kind of common resources that people look for. One of them here is our partner default survey template. So if you're doing planning and you want to just see that as kind of a document on your computer instead of here in the platform, you can download it from here and see that. So we often will do that, look through that first and think about if there's any wording we want to change, things like that, and then go in and set up our survey in here. But the place we want to start when we're thinking about data collection is in our libraries tab, specifically in the questions section. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the question library here. And you can see this is an ecosystem that we set up for a demo a few months ago. I think some of you might have been in our webinar about key players. That's what this one is for. So we've got some questions that are already in here. But I want to first show you the very easiest way to just get started and have a survey that's ready to go is to pull in our standard survey template. And so these are the, questions that we use most frequently when we're doing this work. They're already organized in the order that we typically use them in. So if you really just want something that's very like direct and sort of plug and play, this is kind of your easiest approach. And we just click on that template button. We pull in the Community Partner Network survey. And as soon as you click save, that's going to pull all those questions into your library, but it's also going to do a really important thing, which is to create a question group. And question groups can be reused across surveys, things like that. So once you have that, then you're kind of ready to go. If you want to do multiple data collections with multiple networks, if you're in a network of networks setting, or if you want to collect the same data about the same network over time. That's a good way to just maintain that clean approach to collecting your data. So I'm going to click save here. And you'll see that our question number went from 9 to 27 because we just added those 18 questions in here. And now we have 2 question groups instead of the one that we had before. So we have that Community Partner Network survey in here. It's all in one group, and we can go in and take a look at that group. We'll load that up. So it has the questions are already separated out into sections, like about your network. And we have, all of our relationship questions. So here we have that network member selection question for this question set. And then it gets followed by all of those relational questions that Danielle was just talking about, and our trust and value scales here at the end. So once you have that, you're in really good shape if you want to go ahead and operate from there. You can also reorder those questions using this reorder tool. And while you're in here, you can also delete or add questions. If you have something else, like you want to add a few others that maybe weren't part of this, easily you can pull them into your question group. But I'm going to take us back to our question library to show you, if you want to, rather than using that standard question survey that's in here, you want to create your own. That's also really easy, very, very straightforward. So you want to just use this add button here. And then you can go to our questions, and you have a couple options once you get in here. So we have sections for each of those types of questions that Danielle was talking about, but we also have this section here that has some of our most common questions that we use with Partner. So if you're thinking, you want to pull from that library, and you just want to pull individual questions, you can just click on one of those and it will let you, you can go down and select from any of the questions that are pre-populated in here. So that's one option, and I'll just let's grab one of these if we can. And once you create those new questions, so here, like, what is your job title? You can go in and you can edit them. So if you wanted that to read, slightly differently, like what is your role? You can just make that edit really easily and save it. And that will update then anywhere else that you see that question in your platform. So if you have it in a question group or you're using it in one of your captures, it updates consistently across the whole platform. So that's always helpful. And then you can add questions that are already in our library, and then you can also add questions that you create totally on your own by yourself. And that's just using any one of these tools in here. And it's very sort of, as you would expect, plug and play. You just put in your question text, and then you can choose, what responses you'd like to have in here. So like we might make a yes, no question. We can just insert those responses. And then all that comes together in here. And you can also create a question group for any type that you'd like. So we can just set up a group, and then you can pull in on your own any of those questions that you've got in your library. So you can kind of curate that if you want to have, like, your mid-year survey and your end-of-year survey, those, you can just make groups to do that. And you just add blocks and then fill in whatever question you'd like to pull from your library. One thing that I will highlight in this process of building your survey is that you do want to make sure always that you have a network member selection question, as Danielle mentioned. That's the key to having that network map get populated, but also that any relationship questions you want to ask have to come after that network member selection question. So once people answer that first question, all of their responses about their partners will populate forward. So those are kind of the key parts here for our question library. The other library that's going to be really important as you start thinking about data collection is your email templates library. So this is another thing that you want to think about, just setting up before you are going to launch your survey and before you put together your capture. So in here, I already have a couple of email templates, but I'll show you the process of setting one up yourself. And we already have a few templates populated in that you can start with and customize if you like, or you can start totally from scratch. So you see here, we have an email editor, and you can, populate in whatever text you like. But we also have a set of starting templates in here. The ones that are relevant for collecting data are these first three: the introduction, invitation, and reminder. After you collect your data and you're ready to disseminate, these last two can be helpful for getting tools that you've created in the platform out to people who participate. So sharing that data back. But usually, our best practice is we like to start our surveys with an introduction email that just explains what's coming, why are we doing this work, get people ready for data collection to happen. And we have a base template that's already in here that you can go through and edit and populate in with your own information about your survey. And you can assign it a name. So maybe if you're doing like a mid-year survey, you could say mid-year survey introduction, just so you can keep track of, which emails go with what work you're doing. And over here, we have a number of variables that you can plug in. So if you ever deal with things like mail merges, this is a very similar process. You can plug in, the name of the respondent or their organization name. And then we also have, this login URL. That's the link that takes them directly to participate in the survey. And you can also often, if you want to add information, once you get to that invitation template, you can click this box, and that will make sure that automatically the information about filling out the survey gets added in there with that direct link to fill out the survey. And these templates do include unique links. So when you send them out to organizations, each organization will get a link that's unique to them to participate. And that just helps, maintain good kind of clean data. And so it's important to know that you won't necessarily have a single link that is just open that folks can respond to. But once you create your templates, you can save them, and then you can have your little library of templates in here, and that's all ready so that once you set up your capture, you can start pulling that data in and set up your email schedule as well. So let's go over to a capture, and I'll walk you through the process of setting one of those up. So this is really simple. You first get asked kind of one of two choices here, which is whether you want a survey or a form. Almost always the answer is going to be that you want a survey. Forms are really more for like internal data collection or tracking internal partnerships. Surveys are what we want to use when we're reaching out, getting data from other people. So we'll start with that. I'm going to just create one. I'm going to call this our practice network capture. So we just first assign a name. Then we decide which members we want to include. So you might remember from our previous webinar, we talked a lot about getting your members in, getting them ready to go. Simple enough in this group. I'm just going to pull in all of our test members that we have in this site. But you can choose specific ones, or if you've created groups, those groups will show up in here as well. And then we get to this fun part where we have our questions that we want to pull in. And since we had that standard survey template that we loaded in, that's one of our options. And I'm just going to pull in that survey exactly as it is. And now that's all you have to do to get your capture set up to collect data. And you can see we added in our members, which show up over here as nodes in our potential network. We see, because we haven't done any outreach yet, we haven't shared any links out. Our survey overview shows that no one has participated yet. And as they start to participate, this data will start filling in over here. We can go over to our questions tab. And once you're there, you'll be able to see our survey questions have all populated in as they were in that template that we were looking at before. But now we also have a couple more options for customization. One is the information that we use for consent in here. So if you're working with an organization that has specific language you want to use to let people know about what it means to participate, any potential like risks or benefits, you can go ahead and edit those directly in here. It's just, yeah, there's just a little editor. Same thing with your survey instructions. Folks will often customize this to talk a little bit about why they're doing this work or what, if there are any terms they want to make sure they define ahead of time. This is a good spot to put that so folks have a chance to see that before they participate in the survey. And then you'll see all of your questions show up in here as they did back in that editor for question groups. You can continue if you want to make some changes in here. You can't edit the questions themselves. You always want to edit the questions inside the library so that if there's any changes to the text, that's where you want to do that. But if you decide, actually, I don't really want a certain question in here, you can click on this trash can and pull it out. Or you want to like add a different question, you have that option down here. You can add one. You can also add in tags or headers, things like that. And you can also choose to reorder the questions once you're in here. So that you still have options once you've pulled your questions into your capture for how they get displayed. One thing to take note of is that once you make those edits in here, they don't necessarily go back to your question group. So if you want to make edits that you can use and keep across your captures, you want to do that in the question group area. Now, once we feel good about our survey, we've got our capture all set up, then we're ready to start scheduling emails and thinking about our outreach. How do we get this out to people? And that's where those email templates are going to come really in handy. And we've got an email scheduler in here. And that's, from our experience, the best way to do outreach is really to automate the process, get everything set up and have it go out to the folks who you want to participate in your survey. So this tool here allows you to choose which type of email you're going to send first. So we typically start with an introduction email. You can choose when that email is going to go out. Let's just say maybe we want to send it on Friday. And then you can choose which of your templates you have. So we'll have, we just talked about the mid-year survey introduction. Let's add that intro email in here. And then once you press the plus, it gets added to your calendar. So now you can see that that email is scheduled. It's ready to go. And then, typically we follow our introduction with an invitation. Same thing. Maybe we send that a couple days later on Monday. Now we've got that on our calendar as well, and so on. And so typically we'll populate out this calendar. We usually schedule our data collection over the course of about 3 weeks. And have several reminders that go out, and we often will even send an extension email if we need to, so that we can get people to fill it out with a little extra time as well. But you just populate out your scheduler here, and then you can just sort of watch as responses come in your overview area. It makes things really simple. But if you decide, so-and-so really needs a direct outreach, they need an extra prompt, you can actually go over to this manual email section and you can select one of your members of your network, and you can choose to send them, one of your emails from your email templates. You can also choose a custom selection of members. So if there's like a certain group of members, like folks who work in a certain sector, you're having a really hard time reaching out to them, maybe you just want to send a targeted response to them. You can do that in here by using something like attribute, that sort of thing. So those are kind of the basic ways you send emails. You also have a couple options for the settings you use when you send those emails. So anyone who is a user on your partner account can be the person that emails come from when you're sending them out. So here we have the owner, which is just our key player demo, but sometimes it helps to send emails from a real human who people might know or have a relationship with. So we could say, okay, I want these emails to come from me. And any replies to the emails we send out, I also want them to come from me. And you can set up an email signature, so whatever you want to have attached to those messages, and then you just click this box here. And we also have kind of standard reminder thresholds. So if someone has already submitted the survey, we don't want to keep reaching out to them. But if they, got started, but they haven't submitted yet, we might still want to reach out. And that's why we have these two options here. Typically, we want reminders to go out to folks who have not submitted the survey yet, and those that have completed. We typically use 70% as a threshold. We find that after people have done about 70% of a survey, we're not going to hear more from them. Um, so that's kind of how all of that works and plays out. And once you've done all that work, it will just your survey will flow. You'll watch the responses come in, and everyone can take a break and feel good about the work they've done so far. Now I want to give you just one more view, which is what does this look like from the perspective of the respondents? So after you launch it, you've got your emails scheduled. What will folks actually see? So first thing is those emails that come out. Here's just one example. This is a test email that I sent from this account to myself, and you can see here what that looks like from the respondent perspective. They get their email, and then at the bottom we added in that text that gives them the link to go complete the survey. And of course, as I mentioned, they only get those targeted emails if they have not yet met the threshold that we set for completion in the system. You can also kind of take a look here at what it looks like when they see the survey and take it. The most important thing I think to show is, and here's what your instructions look like in here. What does that network member selection question look like? That's what people ask us all the time. Here's what that question looks like from the respondent side. So we have a few organizations in here that you can choose, and they just click on the ones they have a relationship with, save those. And then as soon as those get saved in the system, you'll see that our relational questions in here get populated in with those responses. So then we can answer a question about what is the tone of this relationship based on who we selected up here above. And then just like any other survey, we can have our any kind of standard non-relational questions in our survey as well. But I wanted to make sure you all had a chance to see both the network member selection and a relational question in here. So that's what that looks like. And then, of course, you can track your response rates. So if you are the owner of the ecosystem, you can track them. You actually will get like a weekly email that shows, what's the status of responses while your survey is live. That's just a setting that you can click in your email settings. And then, of course, you can see it over in the capture overview as well. One more thing that I want to highlight just before we wrap up and take questions is the idea of pilot testing. That's something that we always really encourage folks to make sure that you share your survey with folks who know your partnership well before you send it out. Typically, we recommend finding some people who know the content, know the setting really well, but aren't necessarily going to be respondents. And the reason we recommend doing that is so that we're not asking people to fill out a survey twice. If we make some changes after we do some pilot testing, then we don't want to have to go back and re-ask people to participate again. So that's a really common thing that we want to avoid. And then what we typically ask when we do pilot testing is, questions about, how does the language resonate? Were there any components that were confusing? How did it flow? Do these questions actually reflect what we've set out to measure, that sort of thing? And we also always ask how long it takes to fill out the survey so that we can make sure that we give good information when we are asking people to participate. So those are kind of the main things that I always recommend people look out for, things to think about. We also pulled out, there were a few kind of frequently asked questions in here that we can dig into during our Q&A, which we have some time for as we wrap up. But I also just want to highlight, we have a couple more webinars in our series coming up. Our next one is going to be really about taking this data and turning it into value and insights for the folks that you're working with. How do we use this to actually advance the efforts of our networks? And then after that, we'll get into, how do we share this data to build collective capacity? So definitely, those are going to be really fun. I hope you all will have a chance to join us. And yeah, here's just a little sneak peek at what is coming in that next webinar. We'll talk about, how you can group your nodes and do all this fun stuff, and that'll be on October 22nd. And then certainly, as we're sort of wrapping up, let us know in the chat if there's anything else that you're hoping to learn about or see covered. We're happy to kind of plan our webinars. We always want to bring up topics that are relevant and important to folks who are in this work, doing work in this space. And then finally, feel free, there are lots of ways to stay engaged with us. If you don't already have a free account, I definitely recommend checking that out. That's one way you can start playing and adding your own members and seeing what the tool really can do for you. But also feel free to reach out to us if it's helpful to, do a demo or consult about a project that you're working on. And now I want to open us up with a chance to just talk about questions, ideas, thoughts about any of this. We typically like to leave these last 15 minutes after we wrap up just to chat as a group. And I already see someone has a hand raised. If you want to unmute or post in the
Yes.
chat.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hi, Jenny. This is Chelsea Sitimiang from YASPA. I just wanted to know, I've used Oracle software in higher education setting before. And my question is like, what would you say are the key differences between like Oracle, which I know is like a cloud-based service versus like this platform? Because I feel like there's a difference, but also like a similarity. But would you be able to respond to that question if it's relevant?
Jenny, do you want me to jump in?
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Ours is also cloud-based, so that wouldn't be as much of a difference, but we don't really use Oracle, and so probably aren't very equipped to answer that question. I can say what we know is very unique about ours is the whole data architecture in the background of this is designed to capture the complexity of an ecosystem and then networks of networks. And it's a little bit different from what we refer to as, and I learned this from my developer, relational data, like in the in like a SQL database where we link tables. We look at the connections between the data as dyads. And so the data are collected kind of in a different way. So it's really, I think, the methodology of the social network analysis that is built into this, and then the data architecture that is like attached to that would make it different. But I have never, no one's actually even mentioned Oracle as an alternative to this software before. So I'd love to follow up and learn more from you about that.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for the response. Yeah, I know that, just with the overview that your team has shared, it's more visually appealing than
Oh,
Oracle for sure.
yeah.
And it's like user friendly too. Oracle is kind of feels like HTML. Um, you know,
Mm-hmm. Oh,
the
good. Yeah.
mhm.
We really built this for people in community who don't have backgrounds in research, so and really what I think our motivation was as academics ourselves was we were doing so much work that required coding and advanced statistics and knowledge of complex data software, that we were like, how can we take this complex science and put it into a tool that people could use, even if their job is managing a tobacco program at a public health department. So our hope is actually what you just said made me really happy, because I was like, that's kind of our goal, is to not look like HTML. If there's one thing I would say we are not, is that's the way you use this. So thanks for the question though. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I wanted to highlight a couple that I see in the chat in case maybe somebody else has a question like this. Someone asked about the limit to the number of members you can send the survey to. And the system will not limit you in the number of members you send the survey to. But one thing to consider is if you are using one of those bounded list network member selection style questions, that then everybody will see that list will populate with that everybody you're sending it to. So if you've got 1,000 names on there, folks will see 1,000 names that they can choose from. And there's always like one enterprising participant that will choose all of them. And then their follow-up questions will populate with all of those. So that's one thing to consider, is just the respondent burden on your surveys in terms of like how many questions you add and how many members you're sending it out to. It can get, when we're doing a network survey, it can get lengthy really quickly. I see Pujith you're raising your hand.
Yeah. Hi, Daniel and Jenny. Thank you for doing the webinar. It's very, very informative. I think a couple of questions that I had. I was so drawn to the slide where you talked about perception of value and, sorry, I think for Daniel, I think perception of value and trust being the measures. I think one of my experience being in academics again is everybody rates each other high, everybody, says each other good things, and everybody, I think, at least on paper, at least on surveys, everybody trusts each other and then value each other, at least on surveys. So in those situations, I think we ran into one of those situations too. What would be the best step forward?
It is such a good question. And you are exactly right. We see the exact same thing. We have seen some variance in this, but we work with communities where they will say, this is going to be so great because we have so many problems with trust. And then we give the survey and they're like, wow, it doesn't say that we have these problems. So I think helping people understand whether the data will be identifiable or not, how anonymous is the ranking. What we do a big promotion around sharing the data, but sometimes we take those measures, those scales, and then we roll them up into like a trust measure and then a value measure for each member of the network. And if the measures are low, it could hurt folks' feelings, so making sure so people will trust the process more if their data will be protected in that way. But believe it or not, we have seen variances to that as well. And it's absolutely amazing when you do see it. We don't talk about it as a weakness in the network, but like if we can actually surface some of those things, imagine what we could do, right, to start fixing them. Oh, and one other thing that we, in the beginning of any project or launching of this, we talk to folks a lot about that more is not always better. And we even mean that with trust and value. I mean, this concept that in community generally, but then in community networks, we are always on the mission to build more trust is just overwhelming and doesn't necessarily mean we're going to have a better outcome. So there is a possibility, and I know this is probably a little unpopular, but there is a possibility that we could have lower levels of trust and get the thing done that we need to, if we work together in a certain way or understand how to leverage the assets and the resources that folks do have. So I guess it's not that I would ever say more trust is not a good thing, but it doesn't always have to be the end goal that we're spending all of our time and resources in. So we need to give ourselves a break a little bit. So I think creating some conversation and narrative that we're not just looking for the highest trusted, people and organizations to put in positions of power and influence will help us get more authentic measures of those things. So,
all right, thank you for answering that.
Yeah,
that is helpful.
Yeah,
is it like a one question rule, or can I ask a small follow-up question?
Sure.
All right, so maybe this is a quick one. What if you run into a situation where everybody said each other good things, there's more access, more reliability, more trust, and and from your experience, you also know that that's not the case, where the coordination of care is not how you anticipated or how the ratings are. What kind of interventions that you can create, sort of countering the survey result that you received?
It's another very good question. So I think that something that we have learned, one of the absolute best ways to deal with anything that seems unusual or surprising or actually very familiar in a network is to show the data to the respondents and say, this is what we saw. Is this what you know? Is this what you see in your community as well? And the reason I say that is because what we end up doing is opening. It's almost like it's funny because we always say like the network map is just like the front cover of the story of your network, and then from there you open the book and there's all the data behind it. Here, I'm trying to share my screen. I couldn't get to the right one, so I'm just going to go as well. But what we have learned is that just showing, for example, a network map to a room, you can have such an in-depth conversation. So if these scores that you'll see come out don't they look too positive, or they're not, reflecting what you are hearing or knowing about your network, I would bring it to the group and show them the data and ask them the questions about it. So within those discussions is often where the nuances come out with that, and you might come up with different ways that your community describes value and describes trust that would be better ways to measure it the next time, once you've learned that. So I always, we do presentations sometimes, and we'll show a data point to a group, and sometimes 45 minutes later we're done with that slide, because the power of the data and the visualization gets to the thing that we're really trying to do, which is get through the complex nature of the relationships that we're trying to describe. And our team says all the time, we thrive on measuring hard to measure things. So we might not have gotten it all right, for sure. We work our hardest, and we try very, very hard to question our assumptions as well. So these are really complex things. So, and your community might have a certain context in which we talk about things differently. And we would encourage you to adapt any of the measures for that context as well.
Wow, sounds great. Thank you so much.
These are good questions.
Thank you.
I do see a question. We're almost at the end here, but has VNL worked with Texas research entities that have additional requirements on software due to internal and external obligations? I think the answer to that is yes. I think we actually, Alex, can you help me here if you are on?
Yes, yeah. I'm gonna follow up specifically on that, but we do have an online resource page specifically with some procurement software requirement information. So yeah, I'll be in touch for sure with that.
Well, and specifically, we are. I think we are enrolled in the Texas grant.
Yes, yes, we do have a license with the Texas certification. Yep.
Yeah, well, that's not true for most states. That one is unusual for us, so it's good you asked that one. Okay, so maybe just last question or two. I am echoing, and I'm not sure why.
I have a question,
Yeah.
if I might. I'm Eldon Porter, and Danielle, we have communicated some over the years. I appreciate what you guys do. I follow as much as I can. I find myself, though, in almost a different reality. I work with Christians around the world on the challenge of facilitating collaboration around complex issues like the Rohingya that are being driven out of Myanmar, and how do different parts of the body of Christ around the world connect and collaborate to be able to address situations like that. The Ukraine war, we have 13 major networks focused on different issues, everything from human trafficking to safety issues, for peace and reconciliation. There's different networks, and they all need to come together and collaborate. I was just wondering, I track over 780 networks, Christian-related networks around the world. Some are geographically defined, some are issue-focused, everything from human trafficking to refugees to issues, all kinds, but trying to figure out how do we create spaces. Some of what you're saying I can really relate to and I can apply. I use it whenever I can. Some I think probably because of motivation for why people are motivated to get involved in something might be different for one who follows Christ. I don't want to justify the differences and whatever, but I would, if there was anyone, Danielle, that in your team or people that you know that work in that field, I would love to be able to just connect, kind of share some of my research and what I've done and the challenges we have. We are way, way behind being able to really use network evaluation and network leadership. We're still in the era where people evaluate the effectiveness of their network by how many people come to their event.
Yeah.
Okay. It's just has no impact, long-term impact. But anyway, so if you have that, I would love to.
Yeah. I can connect you with a couple people, one in particular who we've known for a very long time doing some similar work around the world.
Okay.
And I think one thing that you have really lifted up is just both the complexity of culture and beliefs, you know, and all of the things that, you know, you when you hear us talk about it, it's like we've got technology and data. I mean, that just sounds very it's very one, you know, narrowly focused. And what you're talking about is just layers of the true complexity of relationships and why people engage in them and what they get from them. We should probably talk another time. What I would encourage you to do is, and it sounds like you have, I'm probably saying something you know really well, but just like lean into that. Like if when something doesn't work, like in this framework that we're talking about, we always we try to be very, very clear that we do not think there is one best way to collect the data, to approach people about this, to what words to use. But every community and every network is going to be so different. And it sounds like you're really drawing on some of the characteristics that you know are making this context you're talking about different. So I can connect you with someone though who really has been working in this area for some time, and I think you'll really enjoy meeting him. So let me follow up with that. He's been a part of our network leadership work for about 20 years, coming to almost every event. So that's why I knew him right away. But yeah, and then happy to connect another time also, since we're out of time here.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But for everyone, thank you for the work that you do. Clearly, by these descriptions, you all are doing really important work in your community that is, I'm sure, making a big impact. And there's almost nothing harder than getting a whole bunch of diverse groups and beliefs and people all together to try to get on the same page towards an outcome. So we believe in the work that you're doing, and we appreciate the work you're doing. So please reach out and stay connected. I mean, you can see our orientation is around data and technology, but we really do hope that we can bring that to you to have some kind of way you can build capacity. So hopefully we'll see you on the next webinar. And thanks so much for sticking around, everyone, for so long. And we will see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.